Good evening, everyone. Are you able to hear me?
Yeah.
Reasonably well?
Yeah.
Cool. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for being here this evening. It's unusually hot in this room.
Yes.
Usually I'm freezing. So if you've got layers, you may have to strip a layer or two. And we'll get to know each other better anyway. Welcome to our conversation and dialogue today. We're grateful that you're here to join us. And my name is Georgiana Torres Reyes. I serve in the Division of Mission and Ministry here at DePaul. And I have the good fortune of being up here with friends, with good people who do amazing work. And I have another friend who's on their way in slowly via Lakeshore Drive. And when Kim Hunt arrives, she will slide into the moderator spot. I will tell you a little bit about Kim. She's a racial justice and LGBTQ rights advocate. Kim is a storyteller. Kim's involved in civic engagement to the point where she has helped pass some of the best legislation around queer rights and identity, not only in Illinois, but federally. She is amazing. And she's also a person who's got some expertise around this theory of freedom dreaming. Does anybody know what freedom dreaming is? Anybody out there? Raise your hand if you heard the concept before. It's dreaming about new possibilities, okay? It was developed actually by a researcher and a great thinker, African-American activist who really wanted to look deeply into how we stratify people in the United States and how we might envision something different. We've paired the notion of freedom dreaming with justice for tonight because there are several broken systems in our nation, and one of them happens to be our justice system. As a Vincentian institution, we are called upon. We're not just given permission, but we are demanded. What is demanded of us as a Vincentian institution is that we speak truth to power, that we call out systems that are broken, that we use our brilliance to unknot why those things are broken and how we can change those things. And that's our objective tonight, is to think differently about the justice system, okay? How we might dream asset into these things, how we might lift people up more and harm them less, how we might make a system that looks at reform and change and transformation rather than subjugation and oppression, right? So that's what we're doing here this evening, and we're doing it amongst friends, like-minded folks who also seek a more just system. I'm going to ask the folks up here to introduce themselves. What I'm going to ask you all to do is please give us your name and your pronouns, please. And then tell us where in the system you have been a part, and perhaps a sentence or two about your own commitment to reimagining and freedom dreaming, visioning something different for the justice system. Make sense?
Sure.
Shall we start with Sister Helen Prejean, super cool chick, recent birthday person. Sunday was her birthday. We celebrated her 85th. When I am 85, I want to have a quarter of this woman's energy, and then I'll smile a lot. Sister Helen, thank you.
Is it okay if I stand up?
Yes.
Just briefly, Sister Helen Prejean, I descended into the heart of what we have to change from the ground up into execution chambers, where the state actually kills people. After demonizing them, saying they're not capable of any good, they're natural born killers, they can't change, and we kill them. And I'm in that fire. And then I tell stories of what I've witnessed, and I wrote a book Dead Man Walking. And it became a movie that got an Oscar, the Academy Award, for Susan Sarandon, who portrayed me in the movie. And the New York Met just did the Blooming Opera, a Dead Man Walking. And so it's really get the story out to help people change. My job is to bring it to the American public, change minds and hearts, that not only do we not have to kill people, but we want to restore. So I'm really glad to be on this panel with people that are doing just that, like this Mr. Robinson here you're going to hear from, helping people when they come out of prison to rebuild their lives. And so glad to be a part of this tonight.
Hi, my name is Ervin Robinson, and I'm the Vice President of Community Corrections for the Safer Foundation. And the Safer Foundation gets residents from the state of Illinois, the Illinois Department of Corrections, 3 years before they parole, so that we can help transition them back into the community. I've been doing this for like 15 years now. It's very rewarding. I'm also a member of the Illinois Community Justice Association that works with community organizations similar to ours around the world. And I'm great to be here today. Thank you.
The whole thing.
Yeah, I can't hear it now, so, can everybody hear me? Yeah, everybody's really beautiful out there, thank you guys for showing up. My name is Pablo Mendoza. Where did I land in the system? 22 years in the Department of Corrections, I've been home for 4. We recently opened up a art gallery for incarcerated, ex-incarcerated artists, where we use art as a connective tissue to get to the families of those who have somebody incarcerated, as somebody who's actually committed a crime and perpetrated violence. I went and fulfilled my time inside the state's facilities. My son didn't have any parts of that, yet he had to live that incarceration with me, and I want to make sure that children like that and loved ones have somewhere to go, because we're usually ostracized. So that's what I put in.
Hi, everybody. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, Christina Rivers. It's great to see everybody. Some of you know me. I see students of mine there. Yay. Political science instructor here at DePaul. I came into this work sideways through my research in minority voting rights and representation and underrepresentation. And learned way too late about situations or laws such as felony disenfranchisement, prison-based gerrymandering, how little access eligible voters in jail have to the ballot. I didn't learn any of that in my degree program. I've been learning on the ground, so I feel like I've been back in school for the past, 8 years. And as that was happening, I had the grace to be asked to teach in DePaul's Inside Out Prison Exchange program. Shameless promotion here of that program. We take traditional students into carceral spaces and have classes alongside people on the inside, and it's the best teaching I've ever done. It's totally mutual. There's no one teacher. We're all teaching each other. And so from that, I came up with an idea to enhance DePaul's higher ed programming here. We're at Stateville and Cook County Jail right now. We would like to be in more places to provide student services for people here who have interacted with the criminal legal system, who may have a felony conviction and face all those barriers. And also to formalize a lot of what we've done with respect to voting rights and civic education for people who are or have been incarcerated. I'm about to stop. And so there's a new institution called the DePaul Institute for Restorative Education and Engagement. If you start to see the phrase IRE, the acronym IRE around, that's us. IRE, that's the acronym. We didn't seek that out. It just happened. and we like it. And the last thing I want to say is I'm constantly learning from my friends and my colleagues like Pablo. He just schooled me like for the past half an hour, completely schooled me. And that is so important. And I'm grateful to you for that and all of your friends.
I've got a question, and I want to encourage you all to have some crosstalk. So as I ask a question, you don't all have to just one answer it, the other one answer it. If that brings something up for you, I'm going to ask you to please engage one another as we go. What I'd like to know is the work that you're doing now to reimagine systems. I'd like to know specifically how you see transformation happening in either the program or the system that you're working with, Sister Helen, as you walk across the globe. How do you see, what transformation do you see happening? What do you see changing for the better in the United States right now? If there's change happening, can you name it for us? We're looking for some hope. Anybody want to take that on?
We're stronger over here. We right.
Well, here's the deal. There's 640,000 people released from prison every year.
How many?
640,000. And of that, 70 million Americans have a criminal record. Don't look to the left or right. 75% of who were formerly incarcerated are still unemployed a year after their release. How is that possible? Think about a person gets released from prison. He's given $20, possibly $40 to get home. If you've got a home to go to. Once he gets there, what does he do when that $40 runs out? I have people in my facility. They went to prison when they were 16, doing a drive-by, killed somebody. Now they're 40 years old. Mama's dead, Papa's dead. Brothers and sisters don't want nothing to do with them. So that leaves them on the street. So they end up doing a criminal act and they end up back in jail again. Because most companies wouldn't hire them. If you have a felony record, most companies will not hire you. Up until 2 years ago, if you wrote down on your application you had a felony, they wouldn't even interview you, they just throw it in the garbage. But an act was passed that said, you know, that you have to at least interview the person. Okay. So at Safer, we actually have a group of people that we pay to go out to the employers to convince them of how important it is for them to hire these people. And we basically promise them it's going to be the best thing they ever did. And those employers keep coming back to hire more of our people. Right now, I've got 500 residents in my facility and 90% of them are employed. And they have very good jobs. They're not all washing dishes somewhere. It's based on whatever the skill level is, and whatever skill they learned after they got to safer. Because right now we have a good solar class that we're teaching, and they're getting hired like crazy. Solar, CNC, and they just can't hire enough of them. And so that's what's making a huge difference in making a change on recidivism. Right now, 41 to 45% of the people that are paroled within 3 years are back in jail. Those are the ones that are paroled direct from the prison. The ones that are paroled from our program, that drops down to 16%. Nobody realized the trauma that these guys go through while they're in prison, and even haven't had to deal with it when they get back on the street. For some, the fear is so great, they end up committing suicide. I had a guy 3 weeks ago. The day he was supposed to parole, the day before he was supposed to parole, he committed suicide by taking fentanyl. Because of that fear of returning back to society. And so, over the last 15 years since I've been doing it, I've seen an incredible change, how that's come about. The other part of that is having someplace to go after being incarcerated 20 or 30 years. The landlords don't want to rent to you if you're a felon. So what we've done at Safer is we've purchased some properties and converted those specifically for those people that parole and don't have a whole site or a place to go. And so for $500 a month, they can continue to stay in our facilities until they can build up the ability to move elsewhere. And so nobody realized how important it is for a person to have a roof over their head, a house to go to prevent them from committing another crime.
Robinson, also, it's true that in that program, they're able to keep the money they earn, is that right?
That's correct. The guys that come to us, once they get a job, their money goes into their own account. And I've had guys to parole with as much as $60,000. A number of them paroled with $25,000 in their accounts because they're living free and they're eating free. So all they have to do is go to work and bank their money.
Thank you.
Can I jump in behind that?
Please
Yeah.
jump in while Kim Hunt, a dear friend of mine and colleague, moves into the moderator spot because she's a lot better than me. Pablo.
I'm gonna get out here and do some diversions, so you can just sneak in on there. Yeah, I just want to point out that, yeah, there is hope right now because, I've been home twice. First time I did 18 months and I came home and I got $100. Goodbye. I watched some 80s movies as a reentry. I don't know how that worked out, but, I came back 3 months later, so I won't say it. Following 20 years later, I see a shift in the pendulum swing, where we're not looking at that tough on crime narrative. Children aren't predators anymore. We're starting to look at them as children now, and that gives me hope, right? When I came home in more than 2000. I went to Safer and I got a bus pass. Now I think, at the time I came on this, I had somebody help me there, and now they got folks on the inside. I've been saying that the whole time I was inside, and now I'm glad somebody heard that. And that gives us our immediate needs, right? There's been big strides, right, in housing and different other areas, and they've not come cheap. You know, there's been a lot of blood, sweat, and tears from those that have been directly impacted in our allies, like you see here, who have put in the work to change a lot of what's going on. So Fully Free has really been a big mover in that. They've recognized over 2,000 hurdles for somebody coming home. Like, you can't be a barber, so we had to go in there and attack that, because why? We were barbers on the inside, now we can't be barbers, that doesn't make any sense. So, the other thing that gives me hope is, and I'm partnering with the Real Youth Initiative. These are folks, who are coming out of the juvenile system, saying, you don't treat kids like this, and they wanna reimagine something new, and they're going back inside to talk to the youth and say, hey, we're not supposed to be here like this, there's a different way. And they introduce radical methods like the Black Panther way of thinking and organizing. And when you see that, the Black Panthers were primarily 17 years of age. That was their medium age. So when you're talking to youth and you can activate them like that, that's beautiful. And then now, like in Walls Turn Sideways, what we're doing is we're having these deep down conversations of what over 30 years of tough on crime narrative looks like, right? What it looks like to live in those boxes and then come home and hug your sister and say hi to mom as she's like on her last leg, kind of holding on for you. And then, you know, there's these really difficult conversations where you have to answer why I had to be humiliated to go on a visit, right? We have this technology in the airport where I can go in there and just get scanned. Yet when I go to my visit, I have to get stripped and sexually assaulted on the way in and on the way out. So you're living with this trauma now. And it looks different when somebody comes to hug you, right? You want that proximity, or when you're with your partner or your son, that becomes a barrier, and then you start thinking, what is wrong with me? And I can't talk to anybody here because you don't understand. So we have the circles there where we can make sense of the world kind of within ourselves and kind of just disentangle all the trauma that we did in a very trauma-informed environment with a bunch of caring people who are just looking to heal amongst ourselves. It takes community for us to heal. On the inside, we were just surviving. I came out and I created this place, Walls Turn Sideways. I said, I created it because I don't want there to be any Christians out there who are just being shunned because they have a loved one on the inside. And I was recently told that I created this space, but I'm not spending any time with my son. And that was a slap in the face for myself. So I have to look at the redirection where I'm going in my life, because I want to tell you that there is a urgency in this matter. It is real, because we have people inside who are living some of the most atrocious living conditions, and many of them are not guilty of what they've been charged. As you mentioned earlier, the gentleman down the way, they're going to be our neighbors pretty soon. So we really got to start thinking about, you know, how we treat people and how we want to be treated. So I'm going to say that we're changing that focus, and this is a big exercise in how that looks. So thank everybody for being here.
Thank you all for sharing your introductions. Just as Georgie mentioned, I'm Kim Hunt. I've been in activist spaces for a long time, both on racial justice and LGBTQ equality, and I wonder if you will indulge me for a moment. I know some of you have rushed in here from other places, and I want to remind the folks in the back who are standing, there are seats throughout, and don't worry, come on through and sit down if you want to sit down. But if we could just take 3 deep breaths, it would help me get settled, and it's also beneficial for everybody else.
I mean, this is a program before you even get out of prison. Some of the people I've known in prison, like I'm thinking of Eddie Sonye, he had like 2 life sentences, and when they moved him from, at first you're at lockdown, and this is at Angola State, Louisiana State Penitentiary, for years, working out in the fields, and then they moved him to a dorm, told him he was gonna move to a dorm. He was scared to death. And he had never touched a doorknob since he had been there. In the rec room, you had a doorknob. And just think, when you're freed from prison, all the decisions that have been made for you, what you're told when to move, you're told when you go to work, and then you're out, and freedom can just be, it's terrifying. I gotta make all these decisions. I knew one guy who got out of death row in Florida, and he moved in his sister's house, and he realized, and she said, you can have any room in the house. And he chose a little room real close to the attic, and he realized it was the same size as his cell, that he had never dealt with that much freedom of space. And then we know what they're doing in Europe, that people, you know, the restoration of human life, it's the opposite of the rhetoric of calling people natural born killers and that they can never change. That's the heart of the whole Christian gospel, and it's the heart of the Quran. It's the heart that human beings can change. And so I love being, just sitting next to you, gives me hope. Because look at this happening right alongside. And Jesus always said, you know, we're not going to have a solid field of wheat and a solid field of weeds. They're going to come up side by side. And it's happening in our society. One little thing of hope that's happening in New Orleans, we had for years this DA that went to the death penalty every chance he got. And now we have Jason Williams, African-American, campaigned to be DA of New Orleans, saying, I will never seek the death penalty. And they even have a civil division in the prosecutor's office to free people who have been excessively sentenced, and working to get young people who were thrown in prison for life for drug crimes. They weren't even violent crimes, and they're beginning to free people. So you see it happening. And we gotta be there as part of it, and we can't give up in despair. And we each need to think and work out in our own life what we're gonna do to be part of this movement. Like, we need to know before we leave here how we can help your program, what we can do as a community in support of what you're doing, so that we're engaged. So that's what I gotta say for starters.
So I'm gonna try to answer this question about primary catastrophe, and I'm glad you put it in the plural, because I'm like, I know she doesn't think there's just one. And this is with respect to the criminal legal system, and I added a new one after my conversation with Pablo while we were eating. This is a no priority order. This is freedom of consciousness. What is the stream of consciousness? So the first one is exhaustion. Because those caught up in the criminal legal system, those spaces are really, really exhausting, whether you're behind the bars, working there, going to visit there, driving to see your loved ones, volunteering. It's emotionally exhausting. The time there can be incredibly emotionally fulfilling as well, but it's exhausting. And just thinking about these problems in this particularly more crazy world than ever, at least in recent memory, is exhausting. So that one just kind of floats up. Another really set of pressing problems are what I'm learning more about permanent punishments. There's an organization nationwide, there's an Illinois chapter of it here called the Coalition to End Permanent Punishments. It kind of gets to what you were saying. There are about 44,000 laws across the country that just permanently prevent folks from being able to live their lives, whether it's employment, housing, certification, all that stuff. In Illinois, it's about 1,200, depending on how you interpret the law. And so this organization, Coalition to End Permanent Punishments, is really doing a lot to end that. And there's a lot more energy being built up around that. So I'm kind of also answering the second question about what gives me hope. Is so moments and efforts like that really give me hope. Another huge problem is what folks in political science and voting rights call civil death. When somebody's incarcerated in this country, they lose their right to vote unless they live in Maine or Vermont or Puerto Rico. They can vote in the federal elections in Puerto Rico. So that's 48 states. That's 2 or so million folks who cannot vote. On top of that, when you're in jail, you're eligible to vote if you have not been convicted, but there's almost no access. So there's almost 1 million people in jail who are eligible to vote, but they can't. And that's huge. And that's by design. Felony disenfranchisement is nationwide, but concentrated in the South in some ways.
Can you explain the difference between prison?
Yes, thank you. I keep forgetting to do that. So prison is where you go after you've been convicted. It's where you go for the punishment. And not everybody who's convicted goes to prison. That's another thing we forget, but prison is post-conviction. Jail is where you typically go while you're awaiting your trial, and you either have been refused bail or you can't afford bail. And in some cases, even if it's $200, there's some people who cannot afford bail. And Illinois has tried to change that little piece there, but jail is typically pre-trial, except I think some short, more minor crimes tend to, I think under a year, they may serve them in misdemeanors. They may serve that out in jail. So thank you, because that always gets on my nerves. So thank you for pointing that out. Wow. Okay, so civil debt. There are some academics that refer to people who are incarcerated and have been stripped of their voting rights as almost ghost constituents because they're counted as constituents, but then they're not. And there's a lot about it that resembles the 3/5 clause, except in this case, the ratio is 1-to-1, not 3 and 5. So it's really nefarious.
Maybe that means 1-to-1.
In the 3/5 clause, enslaved people were counted as 3/5 of a person for the purposes of how many representatives a state would get. When we're talking about disenfranchisement and then counting disenfranchised, incarcerated people in prison as members of a district, but they don't count it all, it's 1-for-1. So it raises that ratio. Another really pressing problem for me, and it's sort of related also to the civil death, is just overall, just the dehumanization of these spaces. Absolute dehumanization. Even to things we don't think about, like referring to where folks go eat as chow hall. What do we buy? Cat chow, dog chow. Now that's a military term as well, but there's a lot of animalized, the whole notion of being in cages. It's a very dehumanizing space, and I've witnessed visitors be dehumanized, volunteers be dehumanized, staff dehumanizing each other. It's infectious. So that is very pressing, and it's hard to leave that there. It bleeds out into society. And related to that, I think a huge pressing problem for environmentalists in the room is prisons are toxic, jails are toxic. You can't drink the water at Stateville. I've had people come and take cups of water out of my hand and said, you're not drinking that. And it's not just Stateville. But some of these are very old buildings full of lead paint, asbestos, rust, they're mold. There's a mold patch I used to greet when I went into Stateville, like, hey, Joe, how you doing? I swear it waved at me. Legionnaire's disease. A lot of carceral spaces are built on toxic sites. One of the staff at Cook County Jail told me that the original jail is built on the old garbage dump. What does that say? So just the literal and the allegorical toxicity of these places. And then also the insufficient recognition of trauma, or really a narrow way of looking at it. We can imagine it being in prison, doing what it took to get in prison, the harm, whether one is the perpetrator or the victim or somebody who's wrongfully convicted, all that's traumatizing. But working in a prison is traumatizing, being in that space is traumatizing, being related or having a loved one, and you're kind of, as you pointed out, going through that with them. Is traumatizing, and I'm learning more that not enough, I knew not enough was being done on the inside to address that, but I'm also learning how little or how much more there needs to be done on the outside. And there's a phrase, that's almost like post-traumatic stress syndrome that's carrying on more weight that refers to sort of post-incarceration syndrome because of the uniqueness of the trauma that happens there. So that's the short list.
I got it.
My list is a lot shorter. You know, I got 3 things I'm gonna be there. I'm gonna try to bring time all in together. So, what do I see as the urgent problem is the separation of the populace, right? And what's doing it? It's the narrative, right? If we don't tell our stories, somebody else will. And that's what they've been doing, right? They've had the mic and they've been telling the story. And according to them, I'm supposed to be out here eating your baby.
Yeah.
You know, it's another, and what I'm doing is opening community centers so you can see how that narrative doesn't fit. And the other thing is that we are the ones that create crime and criminals, right? We're the ones that vote the people in, that write the laws, that do the thing, and if we don't want them in there, we can vote their ass out. So that's a super important. Right, and that's just what's really critical right now that I'm seeing is that the current population that's filling up our prisons are women. These are our mothers, these are our sisters, these are the backbone of our communities. That is super alarming. They've learned the lessons of history and they're now attacking the women. So it's, man, I love you guys, you know what I'm saying, but we can't do this by ourselves. I've learned all of my lessons from the strong women that have been behind me to push me forward. And if we don't have them back there, that's just one of my biggest, I don't want to get into that, but it's women who are currently being targeted. And that is very dangerous. I just want to say that. And my list.
How is this happening with the women? What do you mean more women are being targeted?
So, it's originally been a problem where men were the focus of incarceration, and criminalization, but now women are filling up our jails.
What are they getting them on? What are they getting?
So what is happening is that the majority of women that are going into prison, they're going into prison for defending themselves, right? You're in an abusive relationship. You know, you go through the procedures, you follow what you have to follow, and then you're left in the corner. You're defending yourself or your child in this relationship. And one of the things I want to point out that it's not a good, bad man versus woman. It's we're suffering the harms of trauma and hurt people, like our students on the inside say, hurt people. And until we're not healed, we're going to continuously be hurting each other. So what our focus is in that healing process, right? Because I could be out here on a job with 60,000 in my pocket, but if I still have the same hurt mentality, I'm going to go into the same workforce having the same thing.
Yeah.
But turning back to the women, it's super important that we recognize that, you know, we're allowing this to happen. And we're allowing this to happen to our mothers and our daughters and our sisters. And it's super important that we start turning an eye toward this because we've turned an eye away from it. This only happens if we continue to turn that blind eye. So I encourage folks to get more involved.
Yeah. Can I tell one more good news story? One more good news. So where's hope happening? So in California, you've been following this at all the men were sent off of death row into the main prison. And that's been an argument that's been going on because the rhetoric to put people on death row is these people are natural born killers and they're more violent. And it's always been, no, but not more violent than people in prison that have gotten life sentences. So Gavin Newsom is a progressive governor and he moved all the men out into regular prisons from death row and he shut down the killing facility. So the women, there are women on death row in California too, and I happen to be accompanying one of them, Carrie. who's become a good friend. And the women had a tough time because on death row, when you go to the day room, they lock you in a cage. And they had some crazy people in it. I mean, this woman called herself crazy. She was crazy. And one day Carrie was just sitting there writing cards and crazy came and just smashed into her. You did this and broke her nose. And she had no way to save herself from the violence. So she's coming out of a really tough situation of the women on death row in California. Well, the word was coming to them that you too are gonna go into the main prison. The women's prison is right next to death row, which is very, fenced in, locked up. And Carrie didn't believe that it was gonna happen. She was even told, who, you're gonna be in a suite with two other women. So name who you'd like to be with. She going, yeah, right. She gave the name of two friends and she had medical issues. And so you'll be in the medical unit. And a month ago, the women got word that morning, pack your stuff, you're gonna move out of death row into the main prison. They all line up. Carrie was the first one at the gate. The women are there to welcome her, and all of them. And they opened the gate, and the first thing they did, they took her handcuffs off. The other thing is, they were not gonna be strip searched when they moved from one part of the prison to the other. And then lo and behold, she was put in a suite with her good friends. And they had file cabinets, so they were good friends, so they divided the rooms. She had her section. And they had their own shower. And to be able to take a shower, I said, does a hot water work? I mean, does a shower? She said, yeah, it works. And if she has a medical problem, she can pull a cord and she gets medical help. And here's the best thing for her. She always had a little pet. It was a little lizard for a while. It was a little praying mantis for a while. It was a little mouse for a while. And a little lizard for a while. And her unit is right next to the unit where they train dogs to be helpers. And so her sister sent a picture of Carrie with the dogs. And so she's next to these animals. Animals are really important to people. And she, I don't know if she's gonna want to come home, tell you the truth. I mean, really. And I mean, so it does happen. It does happen. And it's through community involvement, people understanding and voting the people in that are for change. That's what we gotta do. That's our part. But anyway, it can happen. Yeah.
Sure. There are some good things happening. I was in DC last week visiting with some representatives from Congress. And some of the things we talked about was the second place act. And some of the good things that was happening was, you probably don't know this, but if you are ex-felon, you can't get SNAP, which is proof. And so they're changing the rules on that now. Another thing is, if you're a felon, you can't parole to someone's house who's on Section 8. Anybody with government assistance, you can't go live with. And the majority of the crime probably happens in the poor neighborhoods where people are on Section 8, right? So that's supposed to change and within the next few weeks. In addition to that, one of the things that, of course, happened not long ago was no bail. I was talking to Pablo earlier. He was talking about how many people are in jail that didn't commit a crime. And a lot of people confess to committing a crime because they couldn't afford bail. You can sit in the county jail for 2 or 3 years waiting to go to court because you don't have the money to bail yourself out. And so they'll present you with the alternatives. If you accept the lesser crime, we'll show you it's time served. You say, oh, great, I get to get out of here. But guess what? Now you got a felony on your case. that you're gonna carry with you the rest of your life. So, you know, so having no bail is a very positive thing for us. And we talked about relationships. I've had a number of residents that have been sent back to prison that were doing great, had a job, doing all the right things. And their significant other wouldn't file a complaint against them, and automatically they go back to jail. Right or wrong, they're gone. And so one of the things that we're doing at Safer is that we have daddy-daughter dances, with daughters actually come into the facility, and we have a party with them and whatnot. And we also bring in the other halves and have conferences with them as well, to let them see that this person isn't the same person you knew 20 years ago. You know, this guy has changed. And so that makes a huge difference as well.
Thank you for that. So I work in the policy arena, and Pablo, I have to thank you for starting this conversation around voting and policy. We think of voting sometimes as this transactional thing that happens all the time, actually, but most people focus every 4 years, a presidential election. And sometimes we are just not excited about candidates and we don't vote. Not voting has consequences. Voting has consequences. But to the points that have been made, you know, there are multiple ways to move the needle on major issues. Voting is one of them. Public policy is another, after your candidate in particular is in and continuing to do that work. This is part of our civic duty, right? It's part of the democracy to push and push and push, particularly as we talk about people, family members who are not going to be able to vote once they leave prison, for those who do get to leave prison. So for folks who are kind of on the fence about voting, understand it's not the end all be all, but it is important. It matters. So I just want to throw that out there.
No, I gotta add to that, right? Political scientists in the room. So just to put this in the context, the US is the only advanced democracy that disenfranchises its people who are in prison, with the exception in UK. And it's no surprise because we adopted a lot of their laws, right? So out of all these other advanced democracies, they don't disenfranchise people who are in prison. Or they'll do it as a specific and conscious part of their sentence. It's not an automatic like here. So it's the irony of when it comes to the way we treat people in prison, we resemble our worst ideological foes more than we resemble our ideological comrades and colleagues. And if you go on and sort of look at, there's all sorts of charts you can look up that sort of shows what that looks like in graphic form, and it's really quite stunning. I escaped for a couple of months to France last year, or 2 years ago, and I gave a talk on this in English. And they were just looking at me like, what? You it was literally a foreign concept to them. And prior to going there, somebody had sent me a newspaper article about with a picture of guard staff giving the ballots, they vote absentee ballots to people in prisons. So we really, the concept of American exceptionalism when it comes to voting, we twist it all up. And as a famous, as a former Speaker of the House famously said decades ago, all voting is local. I mean, that's not quite true, but voting at the local level is where we tend to feel the most impact, right? The vast majority of laws that govern us are state laws and local laws. And that's where votes can make much more of a difference. When we're talking about aldermanic votes or voting for judges, we're one of these, Cook County at least, we vote for 1 million judges. Don't get me started on how people vote for judges. Just vote for the XYZ name. You know, seriously, whether it's, you know, right, vote for the name that sounds like yours. That all skin folk ain't kin folk, right? So there's that problem. Or, you know, vote for the party. No. And now there's many more guides to really give you information about how a judge really performs. And some of those judicial elections, you may only have 200 or 300 people voting, because I know when I got the ballot when I first moved here, I skipped that because I didn't know anything about them. But some of them win by 200 or 300 votes or less than that. A lot of local elections, automatic elections, whether it's in Chicago or elsewhere, are won by very, very slim margins. And if enough of us organized and motivated those of us who can vote, and there's sort of a movement that I've read up in some places where incarcerated folks will talk with their family and say, hey, vote on my behalf, right?
Yes.
There's a long history of the vote being seen as a collective action in the Black community. When Black men first got the right to vote after emancipation, there's a history of women going to the conferences, going to the conventions, younger men who weren't eligible going to these things as if they were going to vote, even though they couldn't. And the vote of whoever had the vote in that family, the alpha male, that was not seen as purely his vote. That was a collective piece of property. And so everybody contributed their opinions to that. And so this man was voting on behalf of more than himself. And so there's a similar movement that I'm seeing on the part of some people who were incarcerated or who live in states who are still, where they're still disenfranchised. So voting is, these disenfranchisement rules are not by accident, they're by design to keep folks that the elites didn't want to vote, whether they were because they were Black or Native American, whether it's based on race, immigration status, felony disenfranchisement is everywhere. But it really, really, really matters so much more at the local level. And one other piece of evidence I have in it, at least I call it evidence, is in Illinois, a person with a felony conviction can run for national office, I think, but they can't run for state or local office without a pardon. What do you think that's about? And I believe that law passed in the 70s. I'll have to look that up. That's not something that legislators pass random. That's designed to keep a certain amount of people from having any influence. So I just wanted to amplify that point. Thanks. Thanks for letting me rant. I always rant about this stuff.
Voting and collective action, that's beautiful. I want to bring another voice in the room, and this is not on the list of questions that Georgie gave you, so don't bother to look at your notes. All right. You can answer it though, you got that. Are folks familiar with Miriam Cabo? Yeah, I think you got this. So she has an amazing book out, We Do This Till We Free Us: Abolitionist Organizing and Transformative Justice. And she says in one part of the book, at the very beginning, I think it's Abolition 101 is part of the title. Prison industrial complex abolition is a vision of a restructured society in a world where we have everything we need and more things that are foundational to our personal and community safety. Someone mentioned earlier, I think it was in relation to Section 8 housing and where folks need to come back to. We know that a lot of historically oppressed communities, over-policed communities, have an interesting relationship, right, with the carceral system, with the idea of policing. Folks want to be safe, and sometimes folks look at policing as a sign of safety, right? And then there are folks who just feel like people should be locked up. And so I'm wondering, as you have done your work and thought about things, what are some practices that really stress accountability over punishment? which I think we all agree that our system is about punishment, right? And I think folks generally, even folks who aren't wedded to the idea of abolition, because they're not quite sure what that means, what that looks like. Help folks out. What is accountability, or practice of accountability at a societal or community level look like versus having a punishment system with prisons?
I'll jump in there with a couple of life lessons I was sharing earlier in the room. And just to make a couple of points, where we return to, Austin, Garfield, Inglewood. The three most disinvested areas in the city. Looking for a space, walls turn sideways. 3 to 10 year project. In the west side, make that 20 years. Nobody calls it back. Real estate doesn't work the way it works in the rest of the city. And there's a reason why regentrification is currently happening. So there's money to be made. But what does it look like? So I came home, hit the ground running. Jumped in, advocating for parole Illinois, which currently there is no parole system in Illinois. So you keep hearing parole, but there is no such thing. We do our time. There is no parole system in Illinois. Let me tell you, I tell this to all the legislators, and they look at me with the same face you guys are looking at me now. And yeah, so there's not. We serve our time. We got to do an additional 3 years, 2 years, for whatever reason. I don't. But that's besides the point. What I wanted to say was this. I came in there to do some healing, created space for that and for the community. And what I found was I was replicating a lot of the systems that I learned, right? My ID from prison looked just like my high school ID. That's not chance or happenstance. The cadence was just like it was in high school. And that school to prison pipeline is real. So you gotta really understand that even before you're incarcerated, you're getting prepped for the incarceration, right? So as you're going in there, you're navigating your life in these relationships, right? That violence that you're taking in by seeing in the streets, watching cartoons, X, Y, and Z, you play out in school, and we replicate these systems. We go into prison, come out, same thing, replicating the same systems of violence. So what am I doing now? I'm saying stop. Stop, and because I'm a nerd, I like evaluation, I must research what I am doing because, as I mentioned earlier, I built a space so that there are no more questions and I'm not spending time with my question. So I need to really look at my morals and principles and how I'm in community with people. And that's my own individual moments that I must carry. You mentioned earlier our civic engagement. Again, this all happens when we turn the blind eye. It's not easy. And what does it look like? Abolition. I'm an abolitionist. That's why I do art, because it doesn't exist. We need to create it. Our limitations are created by society. All we've ever known were prisons. What are we gonna do with all the bad people? There are no bad people. We are hurt. That good, bad is a binary that was self-created by us. We create the urgency and we can say, stop. I don't want to be in a relationship with this in this way. But again, it takes for us to come in community. That's why I built the space. And that's why this space was built, so that we can have this difficult dialogue. Because I don't want to minimize the pain that everybody feels. Right? My victims' families feel a pain. And what do we know? What we were taught, an eye for an eye. Some kind of redemption needs to be had. But you know what? Before I acted violence on people, I had violence acted on me. So, one of the things I learned during trauma is that we replicate what we know, what we were taught. So I replicated the violence that was brought out to me. So I had to stop and say, hey, do I want to keep continuing this trend? I must try it a different way. That's what we're here to do today.
Along that same trend. The Illinois Department of Corrections went from something like 32,000 inmates down to like 22 or 23,000. To the point they need to close the prisons. Unfortunately, those prisons that need to be closed are in Southern Illinois. When they do a head count for the state, all those prisoners that's in that prison in Southern Illinois gets counted as part of the community, which gives them more dollars from the state and the feds than the city. We've been trying to get them to count those people that came from Cook County, in Cook County, which would give you enough money to open up enough youth and art centers and other things that would prevent these guys from running around, pulling the car, sticking up folks. So that's something to think about.
I didn't have my mic on, I said it's all connected, isn't it? I'm gonna ask one more question, then we're gonna open it up for the audience. And I wanna bring Mary and Kava back, and you've all talked about this, about hope. And she said that hope is a discipline. And in her book, she describes a conversation with a younger activist who's a little feeling impatient, right, as we all have. And her advice was, you know, because things weren't happening when this person wanted to happen, she said, your timeline is not the timeline on which movements occur. Your timeline is incidental. Your timeline is only for yourself to work on your growth and your living. So what are some lessons that you have learned about the arc of justice, if you will, or how long it takes or what it takes to actually see things shift and how you stay in the work? There are lots of students in the room who are embarking and already doing amazing things and embarking on doing other things. And there are going to be those moments where you go, wow, am I doing this? Right? How long is this going to take? So as folks who have been at it for a while, what are some things that you've learned that you can pass on to just really embed this idea that hope really is a discipline and that the timeline might be a little different than what you have in mind? Pablo.
I love to hear myself talk, but no, it's so relevant because like last Friday I was in emotional wreck, and then I was like, I'm taking the week because I hit a wall, right? And one of the things I learned in there is that abolition is not going to happen in my lifetime. And I started reflecting on minds from the past and thinking, no, King, right? But he said, I move with the dream that it will happen sometime in the future. And I use my energy now to bring that about. So I know it's not gonna happen now. I won't see it, but I move with the thought that it's gonna happen eventually, right? Because I believe in balance. And right now, we're out of balance. I'm just gonna say that. Hope is a discipline. And, one of the tools that I'm using right now is journaling. Super important. It helps me release. But I don't just journal, just anything. My first thing I do when I wake up is 3 minutes of affirmation, right? Well, I'm a badass, right? Hey, listen, if nobody's gonna tell you, you gotta tell you, but if you go to work worried about the job, or you go to school worried about the exam, that's the way you're gonna perform. But if you go in there knowing you're gonna rock it out because you know all this stuff about political science or whatnot, you're gonna go in there, you're gonna rock it out, you know what I'm saying? Just off of confidence, that's just energy, that's how it works. You put out and you get back what you put out, right? So the other thing I'm looking at is really important is the lens that you put on this. We can look at it as through a negative deficit lens, right? Or you can look at it as something where you can achieve some kind of greatness, right? So that's super important. And that focus is gonna just not just move the way you move in the movement, but the way you move with everybody around you. That's those people that you say that you love. The other thing I want to caution is that secondary trauma is real. So we have enough with our primary and our intergenerational, and then stack them on top of each other, but secondary trauma is real. And there are tools for you to actually look at it, right? And you know, I will offer them to whoever wants to. It's just a simple email. You take a test when you're chill, and then you periodically check yourself to see where you're at. One of those lessons in doing that is that every 2 months, I need a break. That means I need to go put my feet in some sand. I have to prepare, I have to budget, I have to make sure that I get those needs, because come month 3, I need a week to take off. And then guess what? I don't got a week to take off because I went spring break or whatever the hell I went to, you know? But it's super important how you walk into the work, the prep work that you go in there, because it's gonna mean what you're gonna get out of there. And then, you know, again, I just want to caution those regular pauses to allow time for you. Remember that there is an urgency, and it's beyond anything you or I can do. It will be there, and it has been there. And if we go in there thinking you're gonna change this on your own, I'm gonna say, maybe this work isn't for you right now. And I'm gonna caution you not to step into that, but just remember that every little bit of energy to stop this moving force is a little bit that helps. And it looks differently, right? You don't have to walk into prisons. It can be hello, how you doing? To the person that's ringing up your groceries, how's your day going? You don't know who you're talking to or where their state of mind is, but it's a simple thing as that, letting somebody into the lane while you're driving. My abolitionist thing is when you have a turn signal out or a tail light out, I let you know, I stop you. Because you know why? Those dollars are gonna go into the prison system. And I'd rather you pay 7 than 150, because the 143 are gonna go to putting my ass in jail, and I don't wanna be back there. So, that's just a couple of things I wanted to share.
It's mostly around how you, stay grounded in the work, knowing that the timeline might be a little bit beyond your lifetime.
Yeah, as somebody who studied voting rights, I've learned to defer gratification.
It's also a sign of maturity, all right?
I mean, you know, there's ups and downs, right? There's been some really marvelous victories with respect to voting rights and minority voting rights. Right now, we're in the trough. I have faith it's gonna come back up, but right now we're in the trough. So part of me is just kind of conditioned to this, and I feel the same way that you do about abolition. I'm not sure if I'll live to see either the end of prisons as we know them or the end of them, period. And so I just try to concentrate and I'm motivated by doing what I can and what we can for now. And even if it leads to like really complicated, confusing discussions like you and I had about, things like how much can we be involved in the abolitionist type work in these systems without becoming a part of it or replicating it or building it. That's a huge dilemma. And so I'm kind of like you, but not as efficient with it. I'm increasingly just letting myself take that downtime which really involves ignoring email. But doing whatever I know you paid for it by Monday, but just for me, it's doing nothing. Doing nothing is vastly underrated. And so doing nothing and when the weather's good, I used to play in the yard, playing in the dirt really is very healthy.
It's
Yeah,
better
it is,
than
yeah.
eating chocolate.
Yes, like get your feet in the dirt. There's enzymes. Yeah.
It's a real thing.
I believe it.
Laying in the dirt is good
So,
for your
play
body and
just-
the endorphins that you.
Yeah, so just play. But I'll also say it's a really hard thing for me to discipline myself to not do anything. And to take that downtime because there's so much of life that just comes at us. And so it's the urgency and I still haven't really figured that one.
Okay, and I got one parting shot. And it is that hope is an active verb. And to do one thing, because it can sound very complicated, look at all these systems, but to do one thing where you're part of something and making a change. And when you put your hand on that road and you do that one thing and you feel the life come through, hope is an active verb. It's not about talking about it. And now in our iPhone, we get all the problems of the world coming into us, information about the world. We're over informed about everything and it can paralyze us. And as long as we just standing on the side of the river and just looking at the problem, to do one thing, to move things forward and life flows through us. Hope is an active verb. That's my parting shot.
The thing is, you have to be passionate about whatever it is that you do. And if you're passionate about it, it's not like work. It's something you enjoy doing. I'm on vacation this week. And yesterday I was in Vegas. Actually, this morning I was in Vegas. My wife and I were celebrating our 52nd anniversary. I couldn't wait to get back here. Because I was looking forward to this conference.
Congratulations. Okay. Are there questions? Is there a microphone out there?
There isn't, but there will be now. Hi,
Hi, thank you.
you're welcome.
So this question is for Sister Helen, and I have been following you for years. I've read your book. I've seen you talk before. I saw the opera both at Lyric and at the Met. I saw the movie.
Brother, you are safe.
But anyway, I certainly know your mission to abolish the death penalty, including for that 1 in 8 persons who is innocent. But what about those 7 out of 8 who are guilty? How has your thought changed in how they should be reformed? Should they remain in prison, those who are guilty? I know part of your mission is those people must admit what they have done.
Look, human beings are gonna change as they're gonna change, but they have a dignity that must not be taken from them. And however that happens in their life, it's what we're doing to them, see? And life without parole is another kind of death sentence. But we move incrementally in social movements. We know we gotta take death off the table. And then we have a long way to go for penal reform, which comes straight out of slavery. All this incarcerated system, what are the plantation owners gonna do for workers when all the slaves were freed and the penal system was set up? And that's why it's no big secret that 75% of all the executions in the harshest penal systems are in the ex-slave states. But we move, and I gotta tell you, my hope is with the American people. Because I've spoken to so many people in this country, and you know what most people say when they get close to this thing? Oh, I didn't know it was like that. They have no clue about how this thing works. So anybody in it, the witnesses in it, we go out, we educate the public, and that's how we change everything in society. We share with each other, we dialogue with each other, we read those good books, and we do that and we change. And it's gonna come incrementally. But first, we know we gotta take this power away from government to decide that you can take some human lives. And you can also make the criteria by which you judge who should die and set up this whole system to determine. So the Catholic Church took 1,500 years to reach the point of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights that no matter how grievous a crime, no government can be given the power to take human life. And so there you have the Christian values, the real values of Jesus, that was always about restoring life and forgiveness, not condoning, but loving enemies. These are our brothers. And doing away with the fear. See, we make be so afraid of each other and then the stereotypes of them. So I believe that change is happening in the country. I may not see it. My good little Southern mama said, Helen, honey, you know, you may not see abolition in your day. And I said, yeah, Mom, I know. But Gandhi said, we do what we do for the integrity of what we know because we know it's right. And we work to the day and we leave the fruit of it to the future. We don't need to see the success. We know we're in the direction and we're engaged. The whole thing is to be engaged in doing something. Because if we just stand in there and we pass it, that's when we get paralyzed. So I do have the hope that it is going to become, you can see it coming in the country.
Really quick question, you were talking about voting earlier, and I think I do it all the time, I do it so I can complain later that the system is changing, and I can't point at myself. But it's a kind of disheartening that a lot of over policing happens in democratic cities and democratic states. So there's not like a difference between the southern slave states that existed in like Chicago, where we're over policing, or New York, where we're over policing, or LA or California, where we're over policing and putting all this money. So how, I mean, besides putting ballots and working as a collective to take down these systems, how do we use voting to change the system besides just doing it and then complaining later?
Can't help you about the complaints with some of these Yahoo candidates, but maybe some of you will run for office. I kind of come back to the local thing, right? So, and the Democratic Party, you know, is a party of both slavery, but also the civil rights legislation. It has really morphed over time, and it's still got some really problematic pieces to it. Some of the issue with the power of the police is that they're very powerful unions. Unions tend to vote Democrat, even though it's sometimes a different Democrat than ideology than what another Democrat would have. And so it's this odd sort of outlier. But police forces are largely creatures of local government. And again, it's those local elections where more votes can make a difference because they're smaller to begin with. I think we also just, along with that, have to learn to speak out in different ways against the police and no shade on defund or any of that stuff. But we have to, and this is hard to say, and not all of us have the privilege of doing this, but we have to learn how to figure out other ways to challenge the police and what it is they're doing, because so much of the shit they're doing is wrong. And it doesn't just involve being in a, you know, taking something over or the signs or anything like that. You know, they work for us. And that's something I think we need to reinforce more often. But I realize that in saying that, not all of us can, I don't say that when they pull me over. But there are people that can say that, and there are ways to impart that message even just in general. So Yeah, they're creatures of the locality and local politics does tend to be easier to change because it involves, it's not these massive elections. And this also involves who we elect on our city councils, whatever you want to call them, city councilors, aldermanic districts. It also involves who we elect for judges. Because police, judges, prosecution, they're all kind of on the same side, and I'm not saying that with a dig, that's just what the team is, right? This has a lot to do with who we elect for state's attorney. And we also got to show up in primary elections. We tend, the sexy elections are presidential elections. We need to show up in primary elections, at least in Chicago, because who we choose to be the candidate makes a difference. And we really saw that evidence with the state's attorney primary, and we ended up winning in that one. And both of whom were Democrat candidates. So we have to be more active in those sort of non-sexy elections because they matter.
This question's mainly for Pablo. It stuck out to me when you said that it takes a community to heal, and on the inside you were just surviving. So my question for you is, how can people on the outside sort of create a sense of community for those on the inside? And I guess what sort of helped you cope doing that?
Thank you for that question, because that means you want to get involved. So, yeah, awesome, thank you for that. So it's simple as writing a letter. Let me tell you, like, everybody hated, when mail time came, because you knew you weren't getting a letter. Don't nobody, who was last person wrote a letter the last year? You know what I'm saying? Nobody writes letters. You know what I'm saying? We got probably 5-10 people in here. I mean, I used to get beat for not writing my grandparents, like, I'm not writing them, just, so writing a letter is super important. Holding space, right? Holding space for folks. That's why I created walls turned sideways, because we didn't have nowhere to go. That's kind of what I was mentioning before. We had Safer, gave us some stuff, but we can't hang out in Safer, right? So we need somewhere to hang out, to have a conversation, right? See how things walk through some stuff, and only we understand, but there's a lot of negative connotations in how we hold space. So even if we do hold that space, we need to hold this space with community members who aren't directly impacted, so folks can look at us different. So that we can have those aha moments, like, oh, I didn't know it looked like that. And start seeing us for people and not numbers, right? I heard the term earlier, inmates. That's not who we are, right? I'm Pablo Mendoza. I'm not inmate case 7679. No. That's what they use to strip us down. So, stop, have a conversation. And it's super important just to build space, and academic space is so important, because that's one of the spaces we've been denied. And one of the very big reasons why we end up in the inside. But I want to just touch on a little bit about a couple of other questions that were asked, and what do you do about, like, voting and whatnot? I want you to just take this into thought, that they proposed $900 million for new prisons, to build new prisons. Now, this $900 million they're thinking about incarcerating children that are not even born yet. Some that might be sitting here in our audience, maybe 2, 3, 4 years old. So when you're thinking about voting, you got to think about putting people who are not thinking in that manner, and that's the folks that are sitting in this room. You guys got to stand up and go in there and like run for these offices, because going to watch from the outside and complaining is kind of what I've been doing. So I'm getting in here on the inside. I don't want to go into prisons, but I go in there. It's traumatic. You know what I'm saying? When those doors close, they close a certain kind of way. But, I get active, I get involved in it. That isn't for everybody. There's room for you on the outside to do. We do art programming. You can do some hopscotching, whatever it is, your passion. We do it all. We exercise. We like to cook. We like to dance. You know what I'm saying? All of these things are things that help us experience things and learn who we are. that have been kind of stripped away from us because we've not had these opportunities to really grow into the people who we want to be. And just having the space to be in community with folks is super important. You know, I was like, come on, man, I'm in like DePaul, I was like, not even think of walking outside of here, but you guys open the doors. Super important for us to have this type of space.
All right, this question is mostly for Sister Helen and Mr. Robinson. I'm right here, the tall guy in the second row. So I'm not gonna stand, but as you two have many years of work in this kind of community, longer than I've been alive. And I've met many people who would like to go into a more like advocacy field, not just in criminal justice and reform, but in other parts. But what would you say is your best advice for those looking to go into advocacy and spread awareness about an issue that means a lot for them?
I think one thing we need to do here is before we leave, we need to have a sign-up sheet. No, for ways that people can participate in your program. Because we got, and that would be a first step is to get involved with you. So we gotta make sure we got sign-up sheets here for people. So how do you get involved? And you gotta know your own part, what you're interested. Are you interested in education? Are you interested in kids? Are you interested? Can you name that? Can you name something? What are you interested in?
Personally, me and some others I know are like public transit advocates.
Public transit advocates. What do you think? What groups are working on that in the city?
There's a lot of advocates working to help the CTA, get better, more workers and have more reliable service.
So you got stuff happening and you plug into that.
People in the city.
So it's not like you gotta start the whole movement from scratch. Who's doing this and how can I join them? And so then you start talking to people involved in and just say, what can I do? What do you got room for volunteers or where can I plug into this? And that you gotta do for yourself.
This is the sign-in sheet, and it's going around the room.
Okay, that's Pablo's
If you
group.
want to connect with Pablo and some work that's happening, put your name, your email address, and mobile number.
And your waste management.
Okay, going around the room, I will collect it.
But begin with something. And just begin to do it. Call people that are interested, because you're not gonna do it on your own. Does that make sense to you? Okay.
Oh, here.
You got something to say there, Mr. Rand?
Yeah, it's interesting you brought that up with CTA. I've got about 50 guys working for CTA now. They started out cleaning the buses, and if they were successful that first year, they got to move up to bus drivers, mechanics, flagmen, and whatnot, and they're doing excellent. So there's no limit to the places where you can start to make a difference.
Thank you.
I am going to keep on having folks ask questions. I'm going over here next until for 6 more minutes. And then we've got to do some other things, okay? So talk fast.
Yeah, I'll be really fast. So, thank you so much all. And, I am from the STEM Center here, at DePaul, and I just want to say that you can take a service learning course in many different disciplines. You can get a McCormick internship. How many are McCormick interns? Are there a few of you here because you're required to be here? You get money. There's money all over campus for you to get engaged with great groups like Safer, and now we know about our fundraiser, sorry, but yeah, and I want you to come and speak to my faculty. So I wondered if Amelia, could you tell people what Parole Illinois is doing real quickly? and what you're doing with them.
I feel like Pablo can probably answer more about it than me, but we're just basically trying to push to get parole reinstated in Illinois. As he mentioned earlier, it's been abolished since the 70s and no one really knows about that. And so there's like mandatory release parole, which is when you serve your full sentence, but we're trying to get earned release and things like a second look ban where if you serve 20 years of your sentence, then you are up for a retrial. And so we go out into communities and try to talk with representatives and legislators to listen to us. And some of these bills were written by incarcerated men, so it's kind of very proud to go and talk to the public about this. And just raise awareness because not many people know about it. So you can go on the website to learn a lot more and learn ways to get involved as well.
This is a question for Dr. Rivers. You brought up this term a lot, the felony disenfranchising. Do you mind explaining further what it is and what it looks like in the US?
Sure. So felony disenfranchisement means that if somebody is convicted of a crime, that part of their punishment includes them losing their right to vote. And it's sort of means they lose their civic personhood. So felony disenfranchisement is old. America did not make it up. It goes all the way back to the original Greek democracy. And, you know, by all historical accounts, that was the first society in which regular folks could have a say in government. And so there was huge value placed on the right to vote. And so the belief was if one lost that right, if they harmed someone, were convicted of harming someone, that would be a disincentive from them doing it again. Fast forward a few millennia, it grew roots and sort of spread roots into sort of middle Europe and then more modern Europe. And so it was definitely in place in Britain when the colonists came and established themselves here. And so they brought that practice here with them. And so the Greeks are the ones that came up with this term civil death. And notice they weren't talking about physical execution, right? It tells you the value that they put on voting. And in our society, that's not as pervasively felt as it was then. So almost all the colonies engaged in this practice, and of course, the vast majority of people being disenfranchised at that point were white, right? Because Black folks didn't really have much of a chance to vote to begin with. In a few places they did. So it was this fairly sort of equal opportunity thing for the first few decades or so. But when after the Civil War and after, to Sister Helen's point, after African-American men were allowed to vote after the 15th Amendment, one of the first things that the Southern former Confederate states did was they really ratcheted up their reliance on felony disenfranchisement as a way to take those new voters off the scene. And so most of us are aware of things like Black codes and these Jim Crow laws, right? Well, those Jim Crow laws in part were targeted at Black, what they felt was sort of Black criminal behavior. And I say that because in some states you had laws, often they're referred to as pig laws. So referred to sort of pettier crimes, stealing a pig, right? A loaf of bread because you're hungry and your landlord just ripped you off. Where you would lose the right to vote permanently. And often these folks were then hired out to these convict lease systems, which were deadly places to be. Some of the more serious crimes did not involve felony disenfranchisement because there were white folks that were doing that. So they didn't want to disenfranchise them. So we hear about all these Jim Crow laws that very effectively prevented Black people from voting, whether we're talking about literacy tests, really invasive voter registration requirements. Well, none of that worked, the Klan. But the criminal legal system was one of the most effective ways to keep people from voting. So that way, if you were convicted of a felony in the former Confederate states, you lost your right to vote forever. And so that contributed to a huge decrease. And it really contributed to the end result where in some states there were only maybe 4 or 5% of eligible Black voters who were actually registered to vote. So okay, so yeah, and so today we are the only modern, again, I have to keep saying this, advanced democracy besides England that still engages in this practice. Thank you.
Everyone, we have come to the end of our time together, so I've got some things. One of them is, you will see at the end of the aisle, these QR codes. I'm gonna ask you to please invest 4 minutes, 2.5 minutes maybe, in filling out a survey. Programming like this happens when we figure out that it's of value to our community. So if you say it's of value, then it might happen again. So please do take the survey. I wanna say thanks to a number of people. One of them is, where is she? She's in a corner somewhere, probably Joyanna Dvorak, who was extraordinarily incredible and making what happened. We had folks who were doing registration who we're grateful for. This doesn't happen by itself, y'all. Natalie Graham is in the crowd somewhere. Where are you? Can you wave at me? You see the beautiful program and the advertisement, all of that. Natalie, an alum of DePaul, who I am proud to say worked for our office many years ago, created that for us. And then I need to say thank you to my friends up here. Thank you for bringing your stories, for the vulnerability, for your wisdom, for your vacation time, for sharing your birthday with us, for coming on that banged up knee, for going inside and caring enough and bringing all the stories to the outside, for making space and for taking up space. Thank you. To that end, we are going to present our guests with some love, and Joy will tell us a little bit about the love.
So you all are receiving a Vincent goodie bag with lots of goodies in it, including a picnic blanket for those times to go and relax, a candle made by Bright Endeavors, again, we heard this importance of resting when we're in movement building. And you're also going to be receiving in your thank you envelopes here, a special tradition that we have here at DePaul called the shared coin. So only very, very special people in our community receive this coin. It's an offering that we give to those who we feel like are living out the best of our Vincentian mission, who are bringing it to life. And so we want to honor all of you with this gift. This year, there's a quote on the coin by St. Louise de Maria, and this is what the quote says this year. She says, "Encourage one another, and may your mutual good example speak louder than any words can." Thank you for your encouragement. Thank you for your example, which speaks so much louder than any of these words that we can offer you this evening. And thank you for being a part of our Vincentian family.
Sometimes we say the best for last. Sister Helen Prejean, my dear heart. We have a special thank you for you today, and a collaboration with the Office of Student Involvement, who are deeply rooted in our mission. This year collaborated with Joyanna and myself and others to come up with a t-shirt. We've had a t-shirt before at DePaul that says like, I don't know if you've seen them, but they're kind of cool, and they list people's names. So it's like a t-shirt with activists, and it says King, and it says last names of these activists, right? Well, we had one last year that was a DePaul one and had Vinny and Weezy on it. It has Ozanam and Catherine Laborie, you know, this kind of thing. Well, this year, we decided to make a new t-shirt. And what we wanted to do was feature women. Women who showed Vincentian values, who showed leadership, who showed action. And guess who made the t-shirt this year? You made it to the big time. Okay, so Louise de Marion, patron saint of social work. LeComp, you want to say a little bit about LeComp? We've got a whole, wait,
So
got a
LaCombe is
story.
a freedom fighter, and she was enslaved by our Vincentian priests, and she fought her way to freedom. And we last year renamed one of our residence halls LaCombe after her, along with the library, room in the library as well. So this is, again, a part of us healing, a part of restoration, a part of
It's
moving forward. It's
Acknowledging our part as a Vincentian family in the enslavement of peoples and honoring her in that way. Vines is a phenomenal basketball player, female here at DePaul, who just won some amazing awards. So we're recognizing her for her gifts and her athleticism. And then Elizabeth Ann Seaton, cool chick, part of our family. Education at the center and core of, and then there's this Prejean chick. Helen Prejean made the Vincentian activist woman leader t-shirt. Thank you all immensely for tolerating this hot room on this long evening. We're grateful for your presence. Have safe home tonight. Have safe space. Make space for each other. Continue to do good work and make good choices. Peace. Thank you.